So it's how I learned, by doing things like that. So I know that everyone's got different ways of learning, so I try to give you different kinds of things, so visuals and talking you through things and showing you things, but also giving you videos, PDF. I try to mix it and try not, so that I understand that everyone is different and there's no one way of learning. So hopefully I can give you as much as I can. So we're going to move into talking through the archetypal postures and their variations, because this is really going to help you pull a class together. Okay, so understanding the 7 archetypes is the key to teaching variations, you know, including using props if you need to, and making adjustments. So there's 7 archetypal postures, poses, and you saw that in the tables, but we'll just go over them. So the first one is shoelace, and I'm going to go deeper into each one, but shoelace, so my superhero socks are making another appearance here. So shoelace is this archetype. Okay. Oops. There we go. Angela's coming in. And then the second one is the saddle variation, which is this one, Virasana. Okay. And the third archetype, caterpillar. Okay. And the fourth archetype, dragonfly. The fifth archetype is spinal twist. Okay. And the sixth is downward facing dog. And the seventh is dragon. Okay, so that's your 7 archetypes, and then there's different ones that fit in there. And you maybe see, remember Lynn, you asked about the quarter dog, because it's like, you know, it wasn't really, I didn't really manage to make it very clear. So I put something in your group about the quarter dog, and yeah, it's sometimes known as the puppy pose, but you're leaning on one arm. So, but you've got that in your group now. So that's that's part of the down dog group. So let's look at these 7 yin yoga archetypes, and they target the 10 myofascial groups in the legs, as well as the hips, the torso. You know, so all the muscle groups, the 10 muscle groups, and also the 14 skeletal segments. So I put all that into your group last night. So that's where you can start looking at target areas if you want to do it from a anatomical perspective, if you want to be targeting areas in that sense. So let's start with the shoelace archetype. So as I said before, this one could be, you know, as I said earlier today in practice, we've got the shoelace as in, it can be like Gomukhasana, but you can also have don't do as I say, do as I do, you know, don't do as I do as I say it, you know. The square pose, except I'm not really, I'm more of a kind of weird pointy star thing. So square pose, it can also be part of the shoelace family. You can have a tight shoelace. So the tight shoelace is where the feet are close to the hips, okay? You can have a wide shoelace where the feet are forward, so this way, okay? You can have a loose shoelace, so one shin is on top of the other, so the loose shoelace is square pose, okay? An untied shoelace is one shin is front of the other. So this is for some of your less able, you know, a lot of people that don't really they maybe want to start yoga, so they go towards the yin side. So it might be more elderly people or people who are less fit, and they assume yin is going to be the one that's going to work for them. So they find sitting on the floor really difficult. So an untied shoelace might be their variation, and or you can even have a broken shoelace where the front foot is really a lot far forward. So you've got variation: the tight shoelace, the wide shoelace, the loose shoelace, the untied shoelace, and the broken shoelace. There's lots of shoelaces going around here. Other ones that fit into this category is the sleeping swan, just because of the way that the hips are going with this. And another one that that works in this category is the deer pose. But this is a great one for freeing the hips. It makes your pelvis feels more free in deer pose. Deer pose I think deer pose feels great. But that's part of the shoelace family. Okay, so the poses that in the shoelace family, what they should do is they should flex the femur and externally rotate the hip joint and try to flex the femur even more. Okay, so these two actions will target the hip joint, the glute muscles, and the position of the tibia provides information on how much the femur rotates at the hip joint. Okay, so the target areas of the shoelace, from the skeletal perspective, it's the hip joint and the thoracolumbar spine if you lean forward. So most of the time you come into it and you lean forward, but sometimes you want to stay seated, sitting up, and so you won't be working with the lumbar spine. And the muscles its targets for the shoelace is your glutes and your lumbar muscles if you lean forward as well. Okay. So where do you not want to feel this pose? In the knee. Okay, if anyone feels like pain in the knee, it's because the hip is not rotating enough, and it's potentially it can lead to potential injuries. So in this case, you need to modify the shape of the pose, and you can use a block or cushions underneath the hips to raise the hips. Okay, so the benefits of the shoelace pose is that it affects the liver, the gallbladder, and the kidney meridians. And if you fold forwards, the urinary bladder meridian will also be affected, and the stomach's going to be compressed as well. It's a great hip opener as well, and it's a good decompressor for the lower spine when you're folding forwards. It externally rotates the hips and it stretches the inner thighs and the groin. So contraindications for shoelace. So pregnant women shouldn't fold forwards so much, but obviously that goes without saying. If you've got any lower back disorders which don't allow flexion of the spine, don't allow the spine to round. So try and keep that length in the spine. Okay, the rounding of the spine like we do in yin, which it's almost like you've got to unlearn the yoga that you know to practice yin, which makes it all interesting, because you're used to having to really lengthen and fold and use your hips as a hinge. But in yin, you're folding and allowing. But if there's back issues, you're going to keep the spine elongated and not rounded. Okay, so it can be hard on the pelvis and the knees, and it can aggravate sciatica So if you do have sciatica, elevate the hips, okay? So make sure you listen to your students and listen to your body, okay? So that is the first one, okay? So so if anything that's like more of a hip opener thing, that is your shoelace. So let's look at the saddle. So this is almost the opposite in the fact that it is internal rotation of the thighs as well. So before you study the saddle pose, you can actually look at it from two different perspectives. It can be divided into two different things. You can have it as the antler pose. So sitting like this could be a variation. But another variation of the saddle, what comes into the saddle pose, is the seal or the sphinx. There's an internal rotation there, yeah? So the seal and the sphinx are part of the saddle archetype family. Child pose also, the rasana, so anything that's internally rotating the thighs there. Okay, so the target area of, let's look at, we'll break it down into two. So you've got the saddle archetype, but you've got the antler pose, or you've got the seal or sphinx pose. So they've got different target areas. So it depends on what you want to do with them. So let's look at antler pose, this one, thunderbolt pose, sometimes it's known as. The target areas, the skeleton target areas is the toes, the ankles, and the knees. And the muscular is the quads and the quad muscle, sorry. So you can approach saddle from here into saddle this way, from there. Because if someone can't sit on their feet or bend their knees, there's no point in going into saddle yet. So you're really this is their starting point. Some people might not manage yet to go into, their internal rotation isn't there. It might be compression, but it might be tensile. So this is where you will put blocks or cushions underneath their bottom. You know, so that's the modification for that. So always be aware of the knees. So for the seal or the sphinx pose, the target area is mainly skeletal, and it's the spine, mainly the lumbar spine. Okay, so you do have variations of the seal, so it will be the sphinx pose. So in the saddle pose in general, though, the target areas you're looking at, the toes, the ankles, the knees, and the lumbar spine. Because when you're in saddle, you know, the full saddle lying down, you're working with the lumbar spine as well as, you know, so basically breaking down the full saddle pose where you're lying down like this, Supta Virasana, it's divided into antler and seal. That's the two of them. So if you come into the full expression of saddle, it works your toes, your knees, your lumbar spine from a skeletal perspective. But then from a muscular perspective, it's your quads and your hip flexors. Okay? So poses in the saddle family should flex the knee, internally rotate the hip joint, and extend the lumbar spine. Where you shouldn't feel the pose, again, the knees, and the inside of the knee as well. So a discomfort from the internal rotation of the hip can be expected, but should never be, it should never be painful. Okay, so you can use props for saddle pose, as we said before. If you do it coming into antler and you just want to put you come into the expression of just sitting, you can place something underneath. But you can, if you like, you're coming back, back. You can either just stay here, or you can use bolsters along the spine, cushions, to really prop yourself up so there is less pressure on the knees if there's pain there. So you can help yourself come into the full expression if you do decide to work with bolsters. Especially if you have disc displacement or injury, it's pretty much advisable to use a bolster lengthwise, okay? And if you've got tight ankles, you can place a cushion between your ankles and the floor. You know, some people will be like in this, you know, that they sometimes feel it in their ankles. You can actually put cushions underneath here. And remember, we're not trying to prop ourselves up into restorative, but if there's pain or severe discomfort, we want to alleviate that. Okay. So if you find it if you find the pose too difficult, you can flex your knees quite a bit. You know, you can do dragon on each leg first, and then add half saddle, and then attempt full saddle. So we've done that in one of our practices. So really just trying to build up. So doing dragon on each leg, half saddle, and then full saddle. So that just kind of gets it all a bit more juicy. You kind of wouldn't expect people to go like start off in half saddle, you know. So the benefits of saddle pose is that it stimulates the kidney meridians as it flows through the lumbar area and along the lumbar spine, as well as the kidneys themselves. So it's good for your kidneys in real life too, which means it's also good for the adrenal system. So it affects the stomach, the spleen, and the urinary bladder lines. And if your arms are overhead, you're also going to work the heart and the lung meridians too. I find it so much nicer to have your arms over your head in it. It really just opens you up. Having that feeling of openness just makes you feel better, I always find. So it also stretches the feet and the knees, and it offers a deep opening in the sacral lumbar area. It stretches the hip flexors and the quadriceps, and it's great for athletes and for people who do a lot of standing or walking. And it stimulates the thyroid if the neck is dropped back a little bit. So if you've got people with thyroid issues, you can get the bolster and get them to gently take their head, you know, so it's tilted back slightly. It's a great way. There's a lot of, you know, the more you find, you know, the more you work with people, the more you realize that thyroid issues is something that's actually quite common with like women of a certain age as well, and it's another thing that nobody really speaks about. You're told, but these women are, I've got family members that thyroid issues, and yeah, it's like the doctor tells you you've got that, and it's almost like just get on with it. But like, you know, the menopause and things like that. So if you want to help with thyroid issues, and Setu Bandhasana, the bridge, is a good one for thyroid issues. Not that that's part of a yin practice, but if you want to look at that. Okay, if your feet are beside the hips, it's a really good internal rotation of the hips. If you find internal rotation, I love an internal rotation, but a lot of people don't. And if you find you're more of an external rotator, you can. It's not cheating to take your legs more away or your thighs away from you, because remember, it's not about the shape. So you find your edge. So even if you're all it doesn't matter what you look like. It's about how you're feeling in the pose. It's how you do it, not what you look like at all. Okay. So contraindications are if you've got an injury in your back or tight SI joints, because it is the full expression of it is strong on the back. So, and also knees can be tested as well. So really be aware of that for people with knee issues. And ankles can shout quite a lot too, if you're not an internal rotator. So be aware of that. So by maybe raising the hips and the, using, using cushions and stuff like that to raise you up, it'll give you'll be able to open up these meridian lines or work with the target areas without any danger to the knees. Because if your ankles are speaking to you, it's a sign of tight hips. Anything like knee or ankle related, so if your knees, your ankles are speaking to you, it's because of the hip joint. Always, if your wrists or your elbow is speaking to you, it's related to your shoulder. So Kerry, yes, was it yesterday you were speaking about you felt you're feeling something in your wrist. So it's everything that if there's any sort of sensation in the wrist or the elbow, it comes from that socket. But it might be from walking dogs and getting your socket hauled at with that. But anything to do with knees or ankles, it stems from the hips. Anything to do with elbows or wrists, it comes from the major joint. So be aware of that. So any sharp or burning pain, then your students or yourself need to come away from it. So a variation is the half saddle, as we know, or also you can open up into this one or this or this. So these are variations because there's an internal rotation still. Like Parigasana B, I don't know if you would really stretch out like that, but just coming down, coming into expressions of that by taking one of the knees back would be a variation. Or also Triangam Mukha Paschimottanasana. This one, but this one as well is a variation of the saddle pose. Okay, we would come back into half saddle, but you can do it this way too. So, so thinking about which poses you could fit in that work with what target areas, what meridians, so in your 200 hour you're learning about chakras and gunas and vayus, and now we're adding more stuff in with the meridians, but it makes it more interesting. It keeps you on your toes anyway, but it's like keep stripping it all back and seeing it for what it is and realizing it's actually quite it's more simple than any of the complex systems. So if you have it in your tables, you can go, oh, right, okay, and you don't need lots of poses. It's just by systematically choosing some poses that work with what you want to achieve. It's perfect. You don't need to throw in any snazzy flows and things like that. So so there we go. So we're moving into the caterpillar archetype now. So we've spoken about so we're moving into caterpillar, and the caterpillar is the seated forward bend. The target area is the spine, obviously, primarily the lumbar spine. Muscular, it's the lumbar muscles and the hamstrings, and you can use props if you need to. If your students are really struggling, you can get them to sit up on blocks, get their hips raised, and then also I've seen in some yoga classes they place a bolster and get people to lean over there. As long as they're not too propped up and they're not checking out. You need to know that if you're using cushions and bolsters, you're going to be because I would say it's quite useful if somebody's got neck injury or neck issues. By propping them up, they're not having to hold up here. You're still working the hamstrings, the back, as long as it's not, you're not just completely there not checking out, but otherwise that would be restorative yoga, okay? So, so if you've pulled the hamstring in the past, and you know, a lot of people have done, like, not a lot of people, but you know, I've actually seen someone being adjusted too vigorously in a power yoga class where the teachers adjusted them and their hamstrings popped. It's not nice. But once your hamstrings popped, you're always going to have issues with it, even if it's healed. So be aware that if somebody's got hamstring injuries or issues, get them to keep their knees slightly bent. And I think you guys are, as yoga teachers, you're all aware that if somebody's got back issues, not to, you know, to bend the knees and forward bend. And also, you know, as we said before, if somebody has back issues, you're not going to round it, you're going to try. So my neck back issues is my cervical spine, so I will put Jalandhar Bandha to keep this in alignment, to keep my neck safe. But it's the same with any other back injury. You're going to try and keep it straight as opposed to rounding it, okay? So the benefits of the caterpillar is that it stimulates the urinary bladder meridian, because it flows down the back of your body and the backs of your legs. Okay, so this is great for that one. And it's actually one of the most basic and important postures. It stretches the legs, the entire spinal column, and it balances the chi flow. So it stretches the ligaments along the back of the spine. It compresses the stomach organs, which helps to strengthen the organs of digestion. So in other words as well, it's really good from an Ayurvedic perspective, because we as Ayurvedic practitioners, it's about, we want to remove any any toxins in our body, and have a strong digestive fire in our bellies. So it also stimulates the kidneys, and the kidneys being really important from the Chinese medicine perspective. So since the heart is below the spine, the heart is massaged as well. And it helps to cure impotency, and it leads to sex control apparently as well. So there you go. You can control yourself by doing lots of forward bending. So it's great. It's a great aid in relaxing the mind and drawing the senses inwards. So it's a good preparation for meditation. But you guys all know these things too. So remembering the contraindications, it can aggravate sciatica, and so you're not going to round the spine, you're going to keep the spine, you know, you're going to keep it straight as opposed to rounding it, okay? So half butterfly is a variation of caterpillar. It can be put in it's the asymmetrical version of caterpillar. So it shares the same target areas, but since both legs are doing different things, you can stretch one hamstring more because the pelvis is freer, okay? And you can isolate one side of the back during the stretch. So in this variation, you can also move the torso forward towards the center, which gives more space to the rib cage that won't get compressed against the thigh, which means you can stretch your hamstrings deeper. Or you can move the torso all the way across your extended leg, like we did earlier, and get a deeper lateral stretch of the torso. So you can choose. So it's not, so you know, half butterfly isn't Janu Shirshasana. It's you're moving your body in the same way, but we've got there's different targets, different ways of doing it. So you can choose to go in the middle if you want to stretch your hamstrings deeper. But if you go along the extended leg, you'll really get a deeper lateral stretch as well. Okay. So you can use props for that, but it's really, and you also, some people might want to have, like, again, bolsters here for neck issues. Okay, so the benefits are it stretches the back of the straight leg. So it's the benefits of half butterfly, which we practiced not so long ago, not about half an hour ago. It stretches the back of the straight leg and the spine on the opposite side. So it helps to correct imbalances in the flow of chi on each side of the spine. So it is really good to do the two asymmetrical and then move into the symmetrical, because working with asymmetry and symmetry, you can actually start to kind of get rid of some of the imbalances. So it decompresses the spine as well and alleviates low back problems. It stimulates the bladder meridian organ as it flows down the back of your body and the backs of your legs as well. Okay, so let's move into the dragonfly archetype. So we would, remember, it's not Upavista Konasana, but it's just a way of, because we're relaxing into it, we're coming forwards. Other poses that could be linked to it is maybe the frog pose. Yeah, frog. I'm not very good at the frog pose. Yeah, frog pose. And something that that was brought up in my yin training was, so warrior 2 is basically half frog standing up. There you go, something to think about. So I like to get the neurons going, and I'm like, oh yeah. So warrior 2, if you ever do put a standing pose in, it's like, there you go, it's part of the dragonfly. But yin doesn't tend to have many standing, but remember, we started with standing. We had a kind of, well, a standing forward bend, which wasn't Uttanasana, okay, because we weren't working with, really the shape and working with the muscles. It was about letting go. So if you were working with, the archetype of dragonfly, then, and you wanted to do the target areas and you want to do a frog on the floor, you might want to do half frog standing up, warrior 2. So it's just to keep things interesting, and, it's nice to know these things, I think, yeah? So the target areas of dragonfly is your hips, and the muscular area is your groin, okay? So you can use props if you need to, so this is me, I'm just saying it's best not to, but if you're going to use props. So I did give you the Bernie Clark thing. So if your legs don't open very far, you can bend your knees, placing padding underneath them to lessen the pull on the hamstrings, and then pull yourself forward. You can get the pillow. You can get a pillow in front of you again if you find that if somebody's got severe neck issues, But I've got severe neck issues, and I make sure I'm mindful with my neck, but this is ideas for you. And if you've got tight hamstrings, or you're avoiding forward bends due to like back issues or sciatica, you can also do dragonfly lying on your back with your legs up the wall, like a variation of Viparati Karani, okay? So that would be a variation. And even if you don't want to do it for people with tight hamstrings, you can actually do it as that pose, because it actually is really, really, really good for you. As you know, Viparati Karani is a great pose for you. So the benefits of dragonfly is that it affects the urinary bladder meridian in the back of the legs and the back, and the liver and kidney lines through the groin, and the spleen lines through the inner knees. So the twisting version, which we did yesterday, was it? All the days are merging in, but you have done it before. So the twisting version stimulates the gallbladder meridian along the side of the torso and stretches, it also stretches the back of the thighs, the lower spine, and particularly the groin. So it provides a gentle opening to the inner knees. It stimulates the ovaries, and remember we were speaking about our ovaries yesterday, so there you go. So if you're wanting to bring awareness into your ovaries and get them rebooted, the dragonfly is the one to go for. Dragonfly pose can be frustrating for a beginner as progress seems slow to non-existent. I remember being a beginner at yoga and finding it incredibly hard. I remember finding shoulder stand and down dog incredibly difficult. This is like my early 20s. I used to do gymnastics, but when my first yoga class, I remember finding these ones challenging. So it's something that your body's not used to doing. So always try as a teacher to remember back to how you feel vulnerable as well on your yoga mat when you first start. So always come back to your learning days so you can really empathize with your students on the mat as well. So you just advise your students to just stay with it and to breathe into where they are. And I think you guys are all that way inclined. You're very much, it's not about the form at all, and it's about just breathing into where you are, breathing acceptance into where you are, and just knowing that you're fine where you are, okay? So contraindications, it can aggravate sciatica and lower back issues as well. Again, you're not going to round the spine. If you've got inner knee trauma or issues, just bring the knees closer together or tighten the top of the legs, the quadriceps, to engage the kneecaps. You can also, if you do have students that it's hurting their knees, you can get cushions underneath their knees if that's because sometimes people will feel it in here. Just putting something under there just might help them. But sometimes you don't want your students to rely on props. It's just about knowing that it's okay to be where you're at, as long as they're not in pain. So moving into the spinal twist archetype. So obviously the target area is the spine. Okay, so the essence of a twist is that the pelvis and the shoulders are facing opposite directions, irrespective if the pose is standing, sitting, or lying down. So the twist is a counter pose for forward bends and back bends, since it releases tension in the spine. So the more deepest expression of a twist is a seated twist. Okay. So if you're wanting to go deeper into a twist ever, it's about building it up. A seated twist actually gives you that deeper expression. Twists are also tridoshic. They balance all three body types. They bring samana into your body, and it's one of the vayus, which gives you balance. So the joint movements of a twist, it comes from the thoracic spine. And it's important to understand that the range of motion is always the same, whether the shoulder and or knee are on or off of the floor. This is in yin yoga, okay? So keeping the knee on the floor will depend on the femur adduction, the length of the femur, and the ability of the spine to twist. So as you know, everyone's bodies are different, so there will be, wherever you're at in your spinal twist, your expression is going to be different from the next person. So we're speaking about the spinal twist archetype as in the supine version. So for some people, the knees will never touch the floor because proportion always plays an important role when twisting. So the position of the arms and legs is not important as long as it allows to properly stress the target area. The spine, besides twisting, can be in 3 different orientations. It can be in a back bend, in a neutral position, and in a forward bend. So where to not feel the pose in a supine spinal twist is in the thigh or the knee. Okay, so if you want a deeper twist, you can cross one knee over the other before going into the twist. So in this crossed knee, you're choosing to rest your legs below hip height to emphasize the pull in your hips, or you can pull the knees in towards your ribs to strengthen the sensations in your lower back. So you can play around with what works for you or what works for your students. And again, you might want to use props if their knees are far too up high and it's like, oh, you can place like cushions or something underneath so that they're not really feeling it. I find in a spinal twist, by raising my arms or raising the opposite arm, it really it gives you that deeper stretch. And again, it works with the lung and heart meridians as well, which is always good. But I feel a nicer, deeper stretch in that. So if that works for you guys, that's great. But arms over the head in supine twist can sometimes really change the pose, but work with it in your own practice and see what feels good for you, so you could share with your students and give them options. This is the thing, it's that everyone should have their options in their poses, which means everyone's expression and what people want to do, how they want to take it, it's up to them. So the benefits is that it stimulates the kidney, bladder, urinary and the gallbladder meridians. It brings the knees, and bringing the knees more into the chest when you're in a supine twist can relieve sciatica, okay? It massages the stomach and all the internal organs. And twisting at the end of the practice can help to restore equilibrium in the nervous system, okay? So moving into the 6th archetype, which is down dog. So this pose is mentioned because it's one of the archetypal poses of yoga, but down dog is rarely practiced in yin yoga. So it's not like something you're going to go into great detail about. I think it's a nice, it's a bit, because it is a bit yang as well, but I think when you're doing something, especially working with the groin or the hips, in between coming into the rebound, coming into down dog can actually just recalibrate your body, and you know, it's a nice relief. It's something, you know, so and it, you know, so you might have felt that, you know, I've popped in a couple of down dogs in your practice. So don't be scared to pop in a down dog every now and again, but it's not like a hatha practice where there's lots of down dogs and flows and vinyasas and things like that. The down dog is really more, you know, it's like like where we go into tabletop as well, where you're just checking in with yourself, you know. So, but the target areas are the fingers, the wrist, the radius, the ulna, the humerus, the scapula, the clavicle, the thoracic spine, the hips, the ankles, and the toes. Muscularly, it's the upper body muscles and the hamstrings. So, yeah, so it's really just, it's a way of moving in between poses. I find it's a really beneficial pose to use in your yin practice. So moving into the 7th archetype, which is the dragon. So the target areas of the dragon is the ankles, the knees, the femur, the pelvis, the hips, and the lumbar spine. And the muscles, it's the hip flexors. Okay, so the joint movements, both legs move the pelvis asymmetrically, which is fundamental for the strength of the movement. And different positions of the foot create stress in different areas. So today I gave you the option, did you want to do an overstepping dragon or a baby dragon? What did you want to do with your body today? So there's just, and then you can go deeper in into almost like it's the lizard pose if you want. But today for our expression, we were baby dragon or overstepping dragon, and then we lifted up in the torso and leant on our thighs, so it actually changes the expression of the pose there as well. So you can figure out what you want to do with that and where you want to take it. Okay, so it affects your stomach, your spleen, your liver, your gallbladder, the kidneys, and the urinary bladder meridians. So there's a lot of meridian action going on there. It stretches the groin, the ankles, and the hip flexors, and it makes back bends easier to do because the pelvis becomes freer in its movements. So I think this is why they recommend, you know, if you're wanting to move into the full saddle pose, to do dragon and then half saddle and then move into the full saddle, because the dragon is a great way to open up to allow for a deeper expression of the saddle pose. Okay. So contraindications are that it can be uncomfortable for the kneecap or the ankle, and if you're working on your flexibility, the back thigh will be at 90-degree angle to the front thigh, putting a lot of weight on the kneecap. And also your back knee. I've got knobbly knees, so I sometimes if I'm going to be in that pose for a long time, I'm all right with working with crescent moon and things like that. Actually, not really. If you're doing my usual type of practice, if I'm not doing yin, yeah, I won't use cushions. But sometimes if I'm going to be in a dragon for 5 minutes, yeah, I'll put cushion underneath my knee, and I don't think I'm cheating there, you know. So I do have knobbly bones. So if you've got knobbly bones like me, cushions are always good. It's not cheating. Okay, so that's all 7 archetypes. So you've got your tables, and it's not for, again, it's not for you to go, oh my goodness. And you know, when I said, Lynn could go with Kerry, and if she wants, and the other Lynn could go, but it's just because I know some of you guys know each other and you practice together, or you meet up. But you don't have to. I didn't want to pressure anyone either. So it's more, it was more because when I would do that in real life, it's really great to put people into little groups and you work together, because you learn so much from each other, and it makes it more fun as well. So have fun doing it, even if you're on your own. Because you should have all the information now. You've got the books, you've got the Insight book as well, you've got PDFs, you've got videos. I've got a mindfulness PDF I need to give you as well, because mindfulness is something that I don't really teach that in the 200 hours, but I think mindfulness goes with yin. So I will pop my mindfulness PDF that I wrote and put that into your group. And yeah, so we're going to, this afternoon, you've got time to work with your tables. So I've given you a variation of different classes that if you want to try out some yin classes with different teachers, you've got a choice that would be your afternoon practice today. And then we're going to have 5:30 to 6. We'll do, because I know that a lot of you won't have time to do the tables, and you want to go and read your books and do the stuff and feel fine about it. So I'm not going to put that pressure on, so we won't go. If you've got any questions, that's absolutely perfect, but we won't go over the tables. So I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. So the Q&A is basically if there's tying up loose ends, if there's any questions you've got, and also to say, oh, bye after all, the being together live, because it's the last live session. So it's just tying up loose ends, asking questions, saying bye-bye, but it's not bye-bye forever, because obviously I'll see most of you again and hopefully stay in touch with you all. And you've all got this time to work on your assessments and stuff like that. So I won't see you until yeah, I won't see you till this afternoon at 5:30. I better put the record off actually. There we go.